You're listening to the Murphology podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Murphology podcast, aka Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from cyclists who have pedaled to places all over. Each week, we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? Well, on this episode, meet Erin Trautmann. This summer, Erin, who is a teacher, biked the entire East Coast Greenway in 47 days. The East Coast Greenway connects 15 states, 450 cities and towns, and has over 3,000 miles of both people-powered trails plus low-traffic roads. The East Coast Greenway spans from the Canadian border of Maine all the way down to Key West, Florida, and it is considered the country's longest biking and walking route. Erin is going to tell us about her experience as a solo traveler riding the East Coast Greenway. The nonprofit called East Coast Greenway Alliance leads the development of the trail network, and to date, about 1,000 miles of it is protected trail, with the intention to increase that number. So here's Erin. All right, I would like to welcome to the show Erin Trautmann. Hey, Erin.
Hi.
Good to have you on the show. And we talked about this briefly before we pushed record, but I'm super excited because I've never heard of the East Coast Greenway. And somebody reached out to me and was like, you need to interview this girl because she just completed this as a solo traveler. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I had never heard of the Greenway either until my aunt and I were on a ride actually together in the summer of 2021, and she lives very near to the East Coast Greenway route in Massachusetts. So we were riding and seeing the Greenway signs, so I kind of had it in the back of my mind that it, existed, and then I found out that it was this long route, between Maine and Florida.
Yeah. Briefly talked about this in our intro, but you're talking all the way from the state of Maine to the very, very bottom of the Keys, Key West, Florida.
Yes. Yeah. When I first got to the, the starting town in Calais, Maine, my phone was telling me I was in Canada.
Oh, no way.
It does start right on the Canadian border.
Wow.
And then, head south from there. So it's, the idea is behind it that it'll eventually be all off-road kind of multi-use trail surfaces.
Yeah.
But right now it's about 1/3 complete. So it's about 1/3 trail, some paved, some unpaved, and then 2/3 on the roads.
Okay. Well, the cool thing about this too is you completed the East Coast Greenway in just 47 days, which that's mind-blowing to me. And I'm going to do a spoiler alert because I've already looked through your Instagram. You had several days where you biked over 100 miles in one day. So I am glad to have you on the podcast and really excited to hear your story. So let's just throw it out there. Like, give us some idea of your experience doing this ride.
It was really neat. Yeah. I'm a teacher, so I have sort of the luxury of having some time in the summer to be able to go away for a little bit longer of a time. But that also meant the 47 days I sort of had my bookends, right? So I left, the day after the last day of school, and I came back with, a couple weeks before I needed to go, to go back.
Yeah.
So I knew I had kind of a starting point and an end point, and that's kind of how I designed the route.
Mm-hmm.
I was really grateful actually through Warm Showers to get connected with another teacher who had biked it the summer previously. And she was incredibly helpful she must have answered 1,000 questions for me before I went, because she had done a similar trip. So her and a few other people who had ridden the Greenway and blogged about it kind of helped me to form sort of my plan of where I wanted to start each day, where I wanted to finish, because I didn't want to go in with no plan, because then, what if I made it 3 weeks in and realized I was only in Connecticut and, hadn't made as much progress as I needed to in order to finish before I had to go back to school.
Right. And I thought you were really you did a good job as far as at least posting on Instagram that you were so well connected. Like you had great places to stay. And I noticed a lot of the people that you stayed with, gave you tours or they were well versed on the area. So, I mean, high five there.
That was, I mean, a good amount of people were from the warm showers community. Some were family and friends. Some were people that I had met along the way. And I was just blown away. Yeah, God just blessed me with so many people along the way that were just incredibly helpful, right? Things like tours and places to stay, and even something as simple as, let me look at where the route you're taking tomorrow to see, what roads you might want to watch out for, or,
sure.
Areas that you might want to consider a different route, or, so that was just so helpful.
There's so much value in talking to somebody who's local to the area because, your route may look really good on paper, but man, when you get traffic going really fast or maybe no shoulder, there's a lot of value there.
Yes.
So how did
Absolutely.
you come up with this adventure in the first place? You and your aunt are biking in 2021, and then at some point you went, I'm going to bike that whole thing.
Yes. So I had I had the idea just like a little bit in the back of my brain that fall, as the school year started. And then I actually, so what kind of pushed me to sort of, make it happen was I actually had COVID in the beginning of January of 2022, which, it was super mild, but I was out of work for 5 days, right, for quarantine. So I was, at my house, and I was thinking, and probably had a little too much time on my hands, and I thought, I thought this is going to be the summer that I can do this.
Yeah.
Because I thought it kind of turned from one summer maybe I'll do this to why not this summer, that I could do it. So at that point I took a train and 2 buses to get up to the starting point in Maine. And then I took a flight home from Key West. So once I had those 2 bookends in place, then I thought, okay, Erin, you have to do this now.
It's happening. Right?
It's happening. Yeah.
Did you document, how many miles you did each day?
I did, yeah. So I documented on Instagram. So I would post, a couple pictures and how many miles I had done. And then I was also recording on Strava, tracking.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
What I had.
So did you add it all up to find out what you did from north to south?
I did. So I was just short of 200 or 3,200 miles.
Oh, wow.
So it was 3,197.
Wow. That is incredible. And to do that in 47 days, that's incredible.
It was definitely, I had a lot of help along the way.
Yeah. Will you describe, you mentioned that about a third of it is, I would say, pedestrian, like bike lane type terrain, but in general, like what is the terrain like there?
Sure. So I would say about half of what they consider to be completed would be like kind of a crushed gravel type surface. And then, some of it, probably the other half is paved. And then even what is considered an on-road section, you might have a bike lane while you're there. They've definitely tried to pick the most bike-friendly route. It's definitely not the shortest route from Maine to Florida, but they do try to put you on the more bike-friendly roads. But they're definitely, especially as I got further south, there are some sections of South Carolina and Georgia where like sort of the only option is a pretty high traffic road.
Sure.
There aren't as many back roads to choose from as there were in, say, like Maine or Massachusetts or Connecticut or somewhere like that.
I've biked in New York City, at Bike the Boroughs bike ride, but I've never been north of there. So, like, all I know about Maine is just how beautiful it is. But what is it like to actually bike it? I mean, is there elevation or are you surrounded by beautiful ocean everywhere?
So Maine had so many hills.
Did it?
Maine is very hilly. Yes. Yeah, Maine was beautiful. That was the redeeming quality of all the hills. Was the beautiful scenery. But actually, I would say my favorite section of the ride was between Portland, Maine, and Boston.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of trail or sort of low traffic back roads. Just gorgeous scenery. And then the other section I really liked in that area was, surprisingly, well, it was a surprise to me, was Connecticut. That was just really beautiful. The only other time I had been to Connecticut was driving on I-95. So
oh, sure, yeah.
it was nice to see another side of Connecticut.
Yeah. We've talked about this many times on this podcast, just how cool it is to, when you drive through a place, how different it is and how cool it is to then do it by bike, because you're doing it at, obviously a much slower speed, a much more relaxed pace, and you see so many new things. A quick interruption to introduce our newest sponsor, Hammerhead. The Hammerhead Karoo 2 cycling computer helps you find your path forward and unlock your full potential on every ride. And listen, for a limited time, listeners can get a free heart rate monitor with the purchase of a Hammerhead Karoo 2. Visit hammerhead.io and use promo code Murphology at checkout to get yours today. Now back to the show.
Absolutely. That was really neat to be able to see, especially because this route, unlike I think some of the, at least I haven't done them, but from what I've heard, some of the cross-country routes that are a little more intentionally rural, this one really tries to hit like a lot of the major landmarks on the East Coast. So like in New York, you're going past the Statue of Liberty, in DC, you're going past the monuments. And that's just really neat to see on a bike.
Did you do the majority of this with friends, by yourself, with family?
Sure. So of the 47 days, I did 2 with my aunt. So the day before, I stayed at her house one night, and the day before and the day after she rode with me. And then my parents are also, they taught me how to bike tour. So they're into bike touring also. And they came down and rode for 3 days with me in Baltimore, or in, not Baltimore, in Delaware and Maryland.
Oh, fun.
So that was super fun to do that with them. Yeah. So I'm really glad that they were able to join me.
Oh, yeah.
And then actually there was a girl that I met. I ran into a group ride when I was in Connecticut. And I asked them, I said, oh, where are you riding? And they said, oh, we're riding on the East Coast Greenway. I said, oh, me too. So we rode together for a little while. And then one of the girls that I actually met, she came down and rode with me in Virginia for a day.
Oh, fun.
So that was just so kind and generous of her.
Yeah.
And that was actually the first century ride that I had ever done. So the fact to have a buddy and someone to encourage me on that was fantastic.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more about a century ride. Everybody in the biking community knows that means 100 miles or more on your bicycle. So what was it like?
Like I said, I'm not sure I could have done it without. I'm not sure I could have done it solo. It was really good to have encouragement that day, as and just someone to help remind me. Okay, we need snacks, we need water, we need those sorts of things to make it through all those miles.
Yeah. And you said, your parents kind of got you into touring, so obviously they've done some touring themselves. And to clarify, does that mean you had everything on your bike?
I did.
Wow.
Yes.
So can you describe to us like a typical day? You'd wake up, you ride your bike, you go to bed, but there's probably a little bit more to it.
Sure. So I would try to start between 6 and 8. If I was staying with a host family, it was generally more towards the 8 a.m. If I was by myself, probably more like 6, especially when I got into the southern states where it was so hot. It's nice to be able to start and kind of get as many miles as I could done early before it got so hot.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely kind of had a little routine of stopping about every 10 miles to eat and make sure I was hydrated. I was joking on the trip that I had the diet, I think, of a teenage boy during the trip, because it was definitely not the healthiest.
Oh, your
lots
food
of carbs,
choices?
lots of snacks. Yeah.
But in theory, you're pedaling them off. So
yes, yeah, I think so.
Awesome. As you're biking along, are you finding water sources like in the communities at businesses, or are there water sources along the trails, or how did you do that?
Sure. So some of the trails have, water, or, they might have a park might have water. I stopped at a lot of like public libraries as a hidden source of water. So any sort of like public building, like a township building or municipal building, a lot of times you can stop and get water there. Some churches along the way had water. So I kind of got creative about how to find water sources. So I usually kept 3 bottles with me. And then as soon as I had finished one of them, I was on the lookout again for more places to fill up.
Yeah. And speaking of churches, your Instagram is just full of beautiful photographs of churches. So, like, did you, every time you saw a church, you're like, I've got to stop in and just see what it looks like?
Pretty much, yeah. I'm Catholic, and that's, kind of a big part of who I am. So it was neat to kind of visit some of those places that I'd heard about or wanted to visit. So that was kind of a neat side thing. And I guess I didn't realize how many I had taken until someone sent me a message saying, "Oh, I've noticed you like taking pictures of churches." I was like, okay, guilty as charged.
There's a lot of pretty cool things, though, to see inside some of those really old churches.
Yeah, there was, just all over, and not just that, but, just the scenery in general. Like, it was a really beautiful ride.
And we kind of talked about this a few minutes ago, but where did you stay each night?
Sure. So I did a combination of warm showers and there was another, so I used that in another hospitality site. And then I did stay with some family and friends, which was also very, very generous. And then I kind of filled in along the way with like an Airbnb if I needed it. Yeah.
And warm showers, for those who don't know, it's literally a network of people that also enjoy biking or maybe have done touring, and they literally offer up either a bedroom or an apartment or a space for you to sleep. Is that correct?
Yes. And it was just so, it made the trip, affordable for me, and everyone was just so kind and generous. It's just blown away.
And I was blown away by, I'm picturing you biking all day, you're hot, you're tired, you probably get to your warm shower space, take a shower, and then all of a sudden you have renewed energy. And before you know it, you're getting a good meal, you're getting a tour of the community, you're probably hearing all kinds of great stories. That's what was happening in my head? Is that kind of what happened in real life?
Yes, that really is a good description. It was so neat to hear everyone's travel stories, and not just bike travel, but travel in general, and the neat life experiences that I had. And it really was all different kinds of people, and sometimes families, sometimes a couple, sometimes another single person like me. Yeah, it was all different, but really, really neat to see and to meet all those people.
Yeah, I bet. And okay, back to your method of getting nutrition. Let's get into it. I want to hear, maybe your favorite snack or, favorite meal. Like for me, anytime I would see a Mexican restaurant while I was on a long distance tour, I'm like, I've got to find out what their fish tacos taste like. So that was always my go-to. But did you have any sort of special snack or nutrition?
I feel like ice cream is definitely my version of the fish tacos.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I was definitely on the lookout for the ice cream stores along the way. I had some really good barbecue in Charleston, South Carolina. And I realized that the easiest way to have 2 Southerners disagree with one another is to ask them where to find the best barbecue. Because you have all different answers. And I found out, I didn't know this, that there's all different types and different ways to do it. And
that's
so
great.
That was a neat thing.
Yeah. Okay, so, you kept your belly full, and you, it sounds like for the most part, you always had a nice place to stay, but, you're still traveling over 3,000 miles by bicycle. So I'm assuming there were some low points and some high points. Do you want to touch on any? A quick interruption to give a shout out to Primal Wear. Cycling is their passion and apparel is their craft. So if you're in the market for a new jersey, bibs, mask, or any cycling apparel, go to primalwear.com and use code PRIMALMURPH to get 20% off your purchase. Yes, 20% off. Now back to the show.
Sure. So there was definitely a low point. I know you mentioned doing the 5-borough ride in New York. The day I went through New York City, definitely a low point. That's one thing that would be my advice to someone considering this or a similar bike tour is that you won't make not enough, but you won't make as much progress in a city as you would.
Oh, sure.
Which in hindsight seems obvious, but not something I had planned for. So I realized, I think that day I had planned, 80 miles out to Princeton, New Jersey. And it took me 5 hours to do the first 20 miles in New York City. So then I realized it was like 2:00 in the afternoon and I still had 60 miles to go.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a low point, we'll just say that.
Yeah.
But one of the high points was definitely riding through the Keys. It was just beautiful. I'm not sure if it was just because it was so beautiful or because I was so excited to be almost done.
Right.
But it was, loved the Keys.
And I, it's been quite a few years, but I did a Miami to Key West bike ride, and I agree with you. It was so beautiful. But okay, I have two questions for you. Alligators, ? And those lizard things. Like, did you see either of those on the trail?
So I did not see any alligators, which is fine with me.
Yeah.
But I did it right. I saw a ton of those like little lizards that would kind of like you see squirrels in the Northeast.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll just see them dart across the trail, these little lizards or little iguanas that would come. Yes, they were all over the place.
Yeah, and they would, at least for us when we went through, they would, you're exactly right about a squirrel, because it'd be out of the corner of your eye. You're like, I see something moving, and then it would just dart in front of you. Like what? Why can't you just stay in the grass until I go by? Like,
exactly. You think you were almost gonna run over it.
Yeah. So, okay. And I'm glad you didn't see any alligators. It's kind of a funny joke. I rode across Florida the opposite way, on the Panhandle part.
Oh, okay.
And we saw 2 alligators that whole time. And there are supposed to be like over 2 million alligators in the state of Florida. I'm like, well, where are they? But I'll agree with you. I was just fine. Yes, that they stayed away.
I do not feel like I missed out for not seeing an alligator on my ride.
Yes, you are right. So, okay. Any favorite towns that you are like, I have to go back?
I thought Annapolis, Maryland, I really liked. I would have liked to be able to spend more time there. So it's definitely on my list of places I'd like to go back to. I also really enjoyed Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was sitting there, being like, oh, I wonder if I could teach in Savannah, Georgia. I was like, no, Erin, you like Allentown. But no, I loved Savannah. I just thought it was beautiful and so historic. And yeah, I could have stayed there for a week, but
yeah, I think you kind of had a few Instagram posts, kind of like a little joke where you're like, I'm going to retire here. And then another couple days later, you're like, whoa, wait, I think I'm going to retire here.
Yes.
I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely be at least a snowbird in my retirement.
Yeah, there you go. So overall, like, were you really happy with this experience and this event? And would you encourage other people to do it, even though, you're mindful about New York City?
Yes, I would definitely encourage it. I thought it was a fantastic ride. I loved being able to see, it really kind of intentionally goes through a lot of the cities on the East Coast. And I just thought that was a really neat way to see this part of the country.
Yeah. And were you close enough that you could see the ocean quite a bit of your trip?
Not the entire time, but definitely quite a bit of it. Which is neat.
Yeah, that would be very neat. Yeah. Okay, so, now you've been from the very tip top of Maine, you've seen Canada, all the way down to Key West, Florida. Let's circle back to, like, where do you actually live and what's cycling like there?
Sure. So I live in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Which is notable in the cycling world because we have a velodrome for track cycling in Trexlertown, which is right outside. So there's definitely a big cycling community in this area. One of the things I like about Allentown is there's lots of different places to ride. So some of the riders that I ran into in the South were saying, the only place they could find a hill to ride on was if they wanted to go up and down the bridges.
Oh, wow.
Because it's just very flat down there. But here it's like, if I want to ride up some hills, I can. If I want to plan a ride that's more flat, I can. If you want to go on trails, you can. So I like that a lot.
And I have no desire to race on a velodrome, but did you actually ever go out and ride it just to see what it's like to be on that, steep incline?
I have ridden on it. Yes, I would. Definitely not athletic enough to ever race there, but I have ridden on it, and it's different, to
Yeah.
have that incline, and you definitely have to be constantly pedaling so you can stay upright there.
Sure, yeah. And now that you're back, and I'm assuming you're back, teaching, you're back at school, do you still have time to take rides?
I do, but yes, at the beginning of the school year, not nearly as much as I was.
Right.
Definitely more of a weekend activity now.
Yeah, yeah. And did you do long distance cycling before you decided to do this 3,200 miler?
So the only thing I had done prior was there's a trail called the DNL Trail, which goes from like Scranton area, so like northeast Pennsylvania, down to Philadelphia area. So I had done that, and then I had done the Gap and the CNO
Oh, okay.
Trail. I did that solo last summer, which that was a really great ride.
Yeah.
But that's all I had done. I was definitely not experienced in any way.
And would you say, like, I don't even know if this is a good question since you aren't doing long distance cycling all the time, but what was it about this trip that you found appealing?
Sure. So, just I think long distance cycling in general is just a neat way to see places and definitely a neat way to travel by yourself. I don't necessarily enjoy traveling by myself unless I'm on a bike,
Ah, yeah.
because I mean, I don't know if you've had this or found this to be true on your rides, but I think because you're on your bike and you have all your stuff with you, so you definitely look a little weird, to the general, people passing by. So I find that you're more approachable and you're more likely to meet people and, kind of strike up a conversation with somebody. Whereas if you're just traveling on your own in your car, you're not necessarily going to have that experience.
Yeah, I think in general, when people look at your bike and see all those bags and all that stuff, they're really curious. And I agree with you. People approach you just to, find out where are you going. And I think it would be funny if you think back, maybe you're in Maine or maybe you're a little bit south of there. And if anyone asks you where you're going, were you like, oh, I'm just going to go to Florida on my bike?
Well, it's funny if people's reactions change, like when you're in Maine and you say, well, I'm on my way to Florida, people kind of look at you and kind of, yeah, right,
Yeah.
that you're going to Florida. And then, when you're in Florida and people say, oh, where did you come from? It's like, well, Maine a couple weeks ago. And, the reaction's totally different. But just, overwhelmingly kind people. And
Yeah.
it's
So
very nice.
So you're explaining, this epic adventure, and then like the Gap and CNO is also an epic adventure. I was lucky enough to do that last fall, and we got into a hurricane while we were on it, so it was a little bit weird, a little flooded. But do you have other adventures that now that you've accomplished some of these that you're like, all right, in the next couple of years I'm gonna do blank?
I don't have anything specifically, planned yet. Trying to get the school year launched here, but
Sure.
I now that I've taken my bike on the plane before, that was something I had never done.
Oh yeah.
So now I
How
feel
did
like,
that work?
sure. So I had called ahead to a bike store in Key West and I explained, what I had been doing, and I asked if they would be able to save a bike box for me. So they did, which one tip I would have is ask for an e-bike box because they have a little bit more room in them. You don't have to worry quite so much about squeezing everything in tight. So yeah, I disassembled my bike on the side of the road in Key West.
Wow.
And taped it up. Found a real nice Uber driver who took me to the airport with my bike box. But now that I've done that, I feel like, oh wow, there's more destinations I think that are open to me. So I'd love to try some cycling in Europe or maybe on the West Coast, but I haven't put any official plans in place yet.
Yeah. And did you actually just use your bike as a piece of luggage then? Were you able to just check it like normal?
Yes. So it was considered, at least on the airline I was flying, was considered a piece of sporting equipment.
Oh.
So it was the same as a normal check piece of luggage.
Wow.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. And that's something that I have not done yet, is actually taking a bike on a plane. So it's nice to know that you did it and success, and that you're okay with wanting to do it again.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would definitely. Yes, don't be afraid of that. Just for people that might be apprehensive about that. There's a ton of. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, before I tried it, and it really did work out.
Well, this has been such an awesome interview, and I've made mention a few times that you have an Instagram page that you kind of chronicled each day, and mileage and fun photos. So do you mind sharing that so other people could maybe look?
Sure. Yeah. More trip details than you could ever want would be. It's at Erin Rides the Greenway on Instagram.
Erin Rides the Greenway.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Erin, thank you so much for your time and kind of sharing your experience of riding the Greenway. And I wish you the best of luck finding out a new European trip to take in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you bet. Well, that's it for this week. A few great deals to send your way. Use code Murphology at hammerhead.io to get a free heart rate monitor with your crew, too. And a shout out to Lily Trotter's compression socks. Use code Murphology to get 20% off your purchase of the best compression socks. Also use code PrimalMurph for 20% off your Primal Wear cycling gear at primalwear.com. Of course, email me at murphologypodcast@gmail.com if you have a topic or the name of a cyclist you find interesting. Support my podcast at patreon.com/Murphology and visit my Facebook, Instagram, and website for daily entertainment. I have more great episodes in the pipeline, so I hope you continue to be a Murphology podcast listener.